As engineers activated the ancient beacon, Elder Ixal returned to the emergency command center. Holographic displays showed Silari dropships landing in the eastern districts. The crystalline towers, architectural wonders that had stood for millennia, shattered under bombardment, their fragments raining down like deadly hail. "Evacuation status?" Ixal asked, her voice steady despite the chaos. Defense Coordinator Merrick's, his crystal form dulled with exhaustion, gestured to population density maps. "We've moved 60% of the capital's civilians to the deep caverns. The rural regions are largely untouched, but the Gazilari are establishing landing zones near major population centers." A violent tremor shook the command center as something massive struck nearby. Dust sifted down from the ceiling as stabilizers fought to maintain structural integrity. "They're targeting government buildings now," Merrick said grimly. "Our sensor network indicates they're using some kind of resonance weapons calibrated to our crystalline structures." Ixal nodded. The Xilari had clearly studied Velaran physiology and architecture. This wasn't a random attack, but a carefully planned invasion. "How long until total shield failure?" 2 hours, maybe less." Outside the reinforced windows, Ixal watched her beloved city burn. The Velarans had achieved what many considered perfection. A society without hunger, without conflict, where art and science had blossomed in equal measure. Their crystal-based technology had allowed them to expand across their solar system without depleting resources or creating pollution. For 30 generations, peace had reigned. And now it was ending in a single day. Supreme Elder, a young communications officer, called, her voice breaking, "We've lost contact with the southern archipelago. The colonies there, they're gone." A wave of grief passed through Ixal's crystalline body, visible as a darkening ripple across her faceted surface. The southern archipelago had been home to their most accomplished musicians, whose harmonic concerts had drawn visitors from across the planet. "The beacon?" she asked, forcing her focus back to their desperate gambit. Chief Engineer Vex approached, his movements stiff with formality that masked rising panic. "Activated, Elder. Its energy signature is unlike anything in our records. The power requirements are substantial. We've diverted energy from all non-essential systems." "And where is this signal being sent?" Ixal asked the question that had haunted the Velaran leadership since they discovered the device. Vex's crystalline shoulders shifted in the equivalent of a shrug. "Unknown. The beacon appears to broadcast on quantum frequencies that bypass normal space-time limitations. According to the partial translations of the inscriptions, it's designed to reach those who remember compassion when strength would be easier." Another explosion rocked the command center. This one closer, much closer. "If I may speak freely, Elder," Merrick said quietly, "whoever built this beacon, whatever ancient power left it for us to find, they clearly intended it for a moment like this. But will anyone answer? And if they do, will they arrive in time?" Ixal gazed up at the tactical display showing Silari warships methodically destroying Velaran orbital platforms. Their defensive fleet, little more than system patrol vessels, had been obliterated in the first hour of the attack. "We have no choice but to hope," she said, her voice carrying the weight of 20 million lives. "Send teams to the deep archives. Download everything, our history, our art, our science. If we cannot save our world, perhaps we can at least preserve what we were." As her staff hurried to obey, Ixal placed her crystalline hand against the ancient stone of the command center walls. The building had stood for 12,000 years, since the first unification of Velaran nations. "Hold a little longer," she whispered to her dying world. just a little longer. While Admiral Hassan mobilized Earth's rapid response fleet, Captain Rodriguez paced the bridge of the Hyperion, studying the decoded fragments of the alien distress signal. The visual data showed a world of breathtaking beauty, crystalline cities that caught sunlight like massive prisms, creating rainbows that danced across elegant spires and arches. Now those same structures shattered under heavy bombardment. "It's not right," she muttered, pausing the footage on an image of civilians being rounded up by reptilian soldiers. Whatever their technological capabilities, they clearly weren't prepared for this level of aggression. Commander Chen looked up from his analysis station. Transmission decay indicates the signal originated approximately 18 hours ago. Given the intensity of the attack in these visuals, he left the implication hanging. Both officers knew what it meant. They might already be too late. "Status of our hyperspace calculations?" Rodriguez asked, turning to Navigation Officer Park. The young officer, recruited from the Korean Space Agency just 2 years prior, frowned at her displays. The quantum frequencies in the signal included coordinates, but they're using a reference system we've never encountered. I've adapted our navigation array as best I can, but there's a margin of error of approximately 0.8 light-years. Rodriguez nodded. That's close enough to establish orbit and refine our position. Prep for jump sequence. Lieutenant Commander Okafor, the Hyperion's tactical officer, approached with a datapad. "Captain, I've completed the threat assessment based on the visuals in the distress call. The attackers appear to possess energy weapons significantly more advanced than our own. Their hull designs suggest defense systems optimized against similar weapons, meaning our kinetic weapons might actually be more effective." Rodriguez asked, a slight smile forming. "Precisely. Sometimes being the newcomers gives us an advantage. They won't expect railguns and physical ordnance. Most advanced civilizations consider them obsolete." Rodriguez remembered her academy lectures on military history. Humanity had learned harsh lessons about the dangers of abandoning primitive technology too quickly. While other species might have evolved past physical projectiles thousands of years ago, humans had continued refining them alongside energy weapons. The result was the Hyperion's hybrid weapons systems, quantum-guided tungsten slugs accelerated to relativistic speeds, alongside more conventional energy lances. "Brief the gun crews. I want maximum readiness the moment we exit hyperspace." The bridge fell silent as the jump countdown began. The 7 ships of Earth's rapid response fleet, representing humanity's first true venture beyond their solar system in force, prepared to make history in a way no one had anticipated. Not as explorers or diplomats, but as rescuers and warriors. Commander Chen cleared his throat. "Captain, there's something else you should see." He transferred a data file to her console, the complete translation of the distress signal, finished just moments earlier by Fleet Command's Sinolinguistics team. Rodriguez read it, her expression growing increasingly troubled. The message wasn't just a call for help, it contained something else. A reference to an ancient prophecy or prediction. Something about the compassionate warriors and the youngest children of the stars. "They were expecting us," she said quietly. "Not humanity specifically, perhaps, but someone like us." The helm officer's voice cut through her thoughts. "Hyperspace transition in 30 seconds, Captain." Rodriguez returned to her command chair, smoothing her uniform with practiced calm that concealed her racing heart. First contact situations were delicate enough under controlled circumstances. Making first contact in the middle of an invasion would be unprecedented. "All hands to battle stations," she ordered, her voice steady. Let's go make some history. The stars outside the viewports stretched and twisted as the Hyperion led Earth's fleet into hyperspace. A journey of 47 light years compressed into hours by technology humanity barely understood. But what awaited them on the other side would change humanity's place in the cosmos forever. The space battle quickly evolved into a chaotic dance of light and destruction. Silari commanders, accustomed to rigid battle protocols established over centuries of conquest, found themselves confronting an enemy that refused to follow the expected patterns. Human ships broke formation seemingly at random, executed sudden course changes that strained their inertial dampeners, and concentrated fire in unpredictable sequences. On the Sovereign's tactical deck, Admiral Blackwood watched the engagement unfold with intense focus. Her senior officers had deployed their individual ships with unusual autonomy, a command structure that baffled the Silari, who expected centralized decision-making. Phoenix Squadron is engaging their right flank, reported Lieutenant Commander Santos, coordinating fighter operations. That Silari are deploying point defense countermeasures, but our pilots are adjusting tactics on the fly. Through the tactical view screens, Blackwood watched Earth's fighter pilots execute maneuvers that would have killed any pilot without specialized training. Humanity's expansion to Mars and the outer colonies had produced a generation of pilots experienced with varying gravity conditions. They pushed their craft beyond what the designers had intended, using micro-adjustments and split-second timing that even the most advanced Silari targeting systems struggled to predict. Status of their command ship. Blackwood asked, eyes never leaving the display. Shields at approximately 60% and holding. They're well protected, Admiral. But they're keeping position rather than maneuvering. Seems they value formation integrity over tactical advantage. Blackwood smiled slightly. Then let's use that against them. Order the Typhoon and Mistral to execute Maneuver Delta. Target their support vessels first. The two destroyers broke from the main battle group, accelerating at maximum thrust toward the Silari formation. At the last possible moment, they split in opposite directions, each targeting a different support vessel in the enemy fleet's carefully maintained formation. The unexpected maneuver forced the Silari to choose: maintain formation or protect their vulnerable support ships. On the bridge of the Silari command vessel, War Master Kravzak snarled in frustration as his formation began to crumble. His life support officer lay unconscious at his station, punishment for suggesting a tactical retreat early in the engagement. Coordinate defensive fire, he bellowed. Maintain discipline. These primitives cannot withstand our combined firepower. But the humans weren't fighting according to any doctrine the Silari recognized. When the Silari concentrated their energy weapons, human ships deployed specialized reflective countermeasures. When the Silari adjusted to longer-range bombardment, human vessels closed to point-blank range where their kinetic weapons could tear through energy shields calibrated against different types of attacks. Most confoundingly, the humans were defending Velaran evacuation ships without demanding anything in return, behavior so economically irrational that Silari tactical analysts struggled to model it. Latest damage assessment. Vdol reported, scales pale with stress. 2 cruisers lost, 1 battleship heavily damaged. Fighter complement reduced by 38%. And the ground operation? Kravzak demanded. Reporting unexpected resistance. The humans have deployed ground forces to assist the Velarans. Our troops are encountering coordinated defense at key locations. Kravzak's tail lashed violently, knocking equipment from a nearby console. Impossible. No species risks their own for others without prior agreements. It defies galactic conventions. Across the battlefield, the UES Wraith completed its stealth approach to the rear of the Selari formation. The experimental frigate, equipped with adaptive camouflage and sensor-absorbing materials, had slipped through gaps in the enemy's detection grid while the main fleet drew their attention. Captain Michelle Lee gave the order that would turn the tide of battle. Deploy Electronic Warfare Package Alpha. Target their command and control frequencies. The virus, elegant in its primitive simplicity, flooded Selari tactical networks with conflicting orders and falsified damage reports. As planned, the Selari responded by switching to backup systems. Older, less secure protocols that human intelligence specialists had already compromised. In the chaos that followed, humanity's smaller fleet gained the advantage that would ultimately save Velaris. As night fell on Velaris Prime, the human outpost transformed into a makeshift relief center. Combat engineers had repurposed landing craft into shelters, while medics worked alongside Velaran healers to treat the wounded of both species. Despite the language barriers and biological differences, a tentative rhythm of cooperation had emerged. Colonel Hassan surveyed the growing camp from atop a partially collapsed crystal structure. The architecture was unlike anything he'd seen. Buildings that appeared grown rather than constructed, with impossible angles and surfaces that seemed to capture and amplify the fading sunlight. "Beautiful world," Lieutenant Reyes said, joining him at the observation point. "Hard to imagine anyone wanting to destroy it." Hassan nodded grimly. "Resources, territory, strategic position. The reasons never change, Lieutenant. Only the uniforms." Below them, a remarkable scene unfolded. A human medical officer named Dr. Patel had discovered that certain frequencies of ultrasound could temporarily stabilize fractured crystalline Velarans. She worked side by side with a Velaran healer whose name translated roughly as "song that mends," combining earth medicine with techniques that manipulated energy fields Hassan couldn't begin to understand. Colonel, his communications specialist, called over the tactical channel. "Priority transmission from the Sovereign." Hassan activated his heads-up display. Admiral Blackwood's face appeared, her expression carefully neutral despite the sounds of battle in the background. "Status report, Colonel. We've established secure zones in 4 major population centers," Hassan replied. "Evacuation of civilians to the cavern networks is proceeding. Casualties moderate but increasing. The Velarans are cooperating fully. They are surprisingly adaptable for a non-military society." Blackwood nodded. "We've gained temporary advantage in orbit, but reinforcements are inbound, both ours and theirs. This situation is evolving rapidly. I need you to make contact with Velaran leadership. We need to understand exactly what we're fighting for." "Already in progress, Admiral. Elder Ixal has requested a formal meeting at their central governance facility. I'm headed there with a diplomatic team as soon as we secure this evacuation route." "Good. One more thing, Colonel." Blackwood's voice lowered slightly. "Our linguists have completed additional translations of the signal that brought us here. There's something unusual about it. The signal specifically reached out for us, for humans or someone like us. I need you to find out why." Hassan frowned. "Understood. I'll report back within 3 hours." As the transmission ended, he noticed Elder Ixal approaching his position, the crystalline being moved with surprising grace despite her apparent damage. Several facets of her form showed cracks and dull patches. "Colonel," she greeted him, her translated voice carrying musical undertones. "Your people's assistance exceeds anything we could have hoped for. But there is much we must discuss. Hassan gestured toward the command post. My thoughts exactly, Elder. Inside the temporary structure, Elder Ixal studied the human technology with obvious fascination. Your species adapts quickly, she observed, and you fight with remarkable creativity. Necessity, Hassan replied simply. We've had our share of conflicts. Ixal's form dimmed slightly, an expression of sadness Hassan had learned, as have many species. But few remember compassion once they master violence. She hesitated, then added, There is something you should see. Something beneath the central governance complex that may explain why the beacon called your people specifically. Before Hassan could inquire further, an explosion rocked the outpost. A Marine sergeant burst into the command post, her exosuit streaked with dust and scorch marks. Colonel, Zilari forces have broken through the eastern perimeter. They're making a direct push toward the central complex. Hassan's tactical display confirmed it. A concerted enemy thrust had bypassed stronger defensive positions to strike directly at what appeared to be Velaran government buildings. They're not just conquering, Elder Ixal said, crystal form pulsing with alarm. They're searching, and we cannot allow them to find what lies beneath. The evening sky above them lit up with fresh explosions as the battle for Velaris entered a new and desperate phase. The Hyperion vanished into hyperspace, its mission both crucial and likely suicidal. On the Sovereign's bridge, Admiral Blackwood watched the smaller vessel disappear from tactical displays, feeling the weight of Captain Rodriguez's sacrifice. She'd authorized the mission, but Rodriguez had volunteered. The distinction offered little comfort. Status of our remaining vessels, Blackwood ordered, her voice betraying none of her inner turmoil. Dauntless reports shield generators at 32% capacity. Typhon has lost portside weapon systems, but maintains maneuverability. Mistral and Sirocco are operational, but running low on kinetic ammunition. The Wraith is maintaining electronic warfare protocols against Solari communications. Commander Jackson reported. Blackwood studied the tactical display where red indicators represented Solari forces, still outnumbering them significantly despite initial losses. The Hyperion's mission to delay enemy reinforcements might give them a fighting chance, but only if they could hold their current position. What about this planet cracker weapon? Specifics. Science Officer Liu pulled up analysis data. Based on energy signatures and Velaran intelligence, it appears to be a device designed to amplify tectonic instability. It doesn't shatter a planet instantly like in old sci-fi hobovids. It triggers cascading geological failures over approximately 72 hours. Essentially, it causes the planet to tear itself apart through artificially induced earthquakes and volcanic activity. Can we disable it remotely? Liu shook her head. Negative. It's already been deployed to the planet's surface and is burrowing toward the core. We need to physically access the device. Blackwood calmed Colonel Hassan on the surface. Colonel, that planet cracker is our priority target. We need coordinates and a strike team. On the planet below, Hassan received the transmission while directing defense of the Velaran governance complex. His Marines had established a perimeter, but Solari forces kept pushing forward with single-minded determination. Understood, Admiral. Elder Ixal believes their scientists can help locate it, but they need access to their deep scanning equipment in the central facility. He turned to Ixal, who was coordinating with a group of Velaran technicians. Despite being a civilian leader, she had shown remarkable tactical acumen in the crisis. Elder, we need to prioritize locating that planet cracker. Ixal's crystalline form pulsed with urgent lights. Our sensors detect unusual energy readings near the Sacred Mountain range. The Xelari deployed something there shortly before your arrival. The mountain. The same one they're pushing toward now. Yes, the mountain houses our most ancient archives, and she hesitated. Other things. Things the Xelari must not obtain. Hassan made a quick decision. Lieutenant Chen, take Alpha Squad and hold this position. I'm taking Bravo and Charlie to the mountain with Elder Ixal. As they boarded the transport, Hassan noticed Velaran scientists loading unusual equipment. What's that? Prototype defensive technology, Ixal explained. We are not warriors by nature, Colonel, but we are not helpless. Our crystalline technology can be adapted to counter Xelari weapons. We simply never had reason to develop such applications until now. The transport lifted off, skimming low over the crystalline landscape now marred by battle. Below them, human marines fought alongside Velaran security forces, their complementary tactics proving surprisingly effective against Xelari troops accustomed to overwhelming frightened civilians. Your people fight with remarkable unity despite never having met before today, Ixal observed. Hassan checked his weapon systems. Humans adapt quickly to new allies. It's how we survived our own fractured history. As they approached the mountain, sensors indicated a massive Xelari force converging on the same location. The transport's pilot, Sergeant Williams, called back from the cockpit. Sir, we've got multiple bogies inbound. They really want whatever's in that mountain. Hassan studied the tactical display. The Xelari weren't just sending troops, they were diverting significant resources from other battlefronts. Whatever's in there, he said to Ixal, I'm starting to think it might be more important than the planet itself. Ixal's crystalline form dimmed slightly. It is, Colonel. For the entire galaxy, it may be. Admiral Blackwood ran her fingers along the ancient inscriptions, feeling the subtle vibrations that seemed to emanate from the symbols themselves. The chamber housing the beacon hummed with energy that defied conventional scanning, creating a field that made the hair on her arms stand on end. How many other species received this signal? She asked, turning to Elder Ixal. All of them, the crystalline being replied, her form shifting through complex patterns of internal light. Or at least, all with sufficient technology to detect it. The beacon broadcasts on multiple frequencies across subspace bands. According to our scientists, at least 37 spacefaring civilizations would have received our distress call. And yet only humans responded, Dr. Patel said, looking up from her analysis equipment. Ixal's form dimmed slightly. The Galactic Concord, the loose alliance of elder species, maintains strict non-intervention protocols. They document, they observe, they study, but they do not interfere in conflicts between sovereign powers. It is their most sacred principle. Sacred principle. Blackwood couldn't keep the edge from her voice. They're watching a genocide in progress and doing nothing. They would argue they're preventing greater harm, Ixal replied. In their history, interventions often led to escalations, to wars that consumed entire sectors. Their caution was born from terrible experiences. Blackwood thought of Earth's own history, of times when powerful nations had watched atrocities unfold, claiming non-intervention as a principle while millions died. Humanity had learned harsh lessons about the cost of inaction. But this inscription, Dr. Patel said, directing their attention back to the beacon. This specific reference to the youngest children with the oldest souls. It suggests whoever built this knew something about Earth, about humans, long before we developed spaceflight. Blackwood felt a chill. You're suggesting someone has been watching humanity for thousands of years. Or perhaps Elder Ixal said carefully, "They simply understood patterns of evolution and civilization. Perhaps they knew that someday, somewhere, a species would emerge that balanced technological capability with moral courage. The Ancient Ones may have recognized that the oldest spacefaring races would eventually become complacent, cautious, bound by their own protocols." A Marine lieutenant burst into the chamber, snapping to attention. "Admiral, Colonel Hassan reports heavy Silari forces converging on the mountain facility. They've deployed some kind of energy-dampening field that's affecting our communications." Blackwood nodded. "Tell the Colonel to hold position. We're on our way." She turned back to Elder Ixal. "You mentioned a repository of knowledge under your sacred mountain. What exactly does it contain that the Xelari want so badly?" Ixal hesitated, crystal facets flickering with what seemed like internal debate. Finally, she spoke. "The repository contains technologies and understandings far beyond even our most advanced science. Theories of consciousness transfer, energy-matter transcendence, even methods to access parallel dimensions. The ancients who left it called it the Ascension Archive. And the Xelari want to use this to, what? Become gods?" Blackwood asked. "Worse, they believe it contains the secret to transcending physical form entirely. Their empire is built on conquest and resource extraction. Imagine such a philosophy freed from physical limitations, able to expand without the constraints of biological needs or planetary resources." Dr. Patel looked up from the ancient text, Sheeping translating. "Admiral, there's more. This passage speaks of tests, trials to determine worthiness. It says, 'Only those who value life beyond their own kind may access the greater path.'" The chamber shook as distant explosions reached them. The battle for Velaris was intensifying, but now Blackwood understood they were fighting for stakes far beyond a single planet. "So that's why the beacon called us," she said quietly. "Not because we're the most advanced or powerful, but because we still remember what it means to fight for someone else." The Sovereign's atmospheric descent created a spectacle unlike anything seen in Velaran history. The massive warship, nearly 2 kilometers of earth alloys and technology, breached the cloud layer trailing fire and atmospheric distortion. Its shields glowed brilliant blue against the stress of entry, while emergency thrusters fought to stabilize its descent. On the mountain battlefield, even the fighting paused momentarily as combatants on both sides stared upward at the impossible sight. "They're bringing the flagship into atmosphere," Lieutenant Reyes whispered in awe. "That's not even supposed to be possible." Colonel Hassan watched the descent with a mixture of hope and dread. The Sovereign wasn't designed for atmospheric operation. Its systems would be failing catastrophically under the strain. That Blackwood would attempt such a maneuver spoke volumes about their situation. "All units, prepare for close air support," he ordered through the tactical network. "Coordinate targeting with the Sovereign's fire control." Elder Ixal stood beside him at the mountain facility's entrance, her crystalline form pulsing with rapid light patterns that indicated extreme emotion. "Your Admiral risks everything," she said, voice filled with wonder. "That's what humans do when it matters," Hassan replied simply. The Sovereign stabilized at approximately 5 kilometers altitude, its massive shadow falling across the battlefield like an artificial eclipse. Then its remaining weapon systems opened fire with surgical precision. Point defense lasers swept Silari air support from the sky, while guided munitions struck enemy ground concentrations with devastating effect. Inside the mountain facility, the combined human-Velaran teams worked frantically. Velaran scientists interfaced directly with ancient systems. their crystalline bodies serving as natural conduits for the repository's unusual energy patterns. Human engineers adapted their equipment to support the effort, creating hybrid interfaces that no single species could have managed alone. "We're accessing the ancient defense protocols," the Velaran science leader reported, her translated voice strained with effort. "But the system requires authentication we don't possess." Dr. Petal studied the flickering symbols across crystalline displays. These patterns, they're similar to the ones on the beacon. Elder Ixal said the beacon was designed to call beings who remember compassion when strength would be easier. Perhaps that's the key. Outside, Hassan directed the defense against waves of Silari forces clearly desperate to breach the facility. The humans fought with disciplined ferocity, their tactics adapting moment by moment to the changing battlefield. What they lacked in numbers, they made up for in sheer determination and flexible response. Most surprising to Hassan was how quickly the Velarans had transformed from peaceful scholars to effective defenders. They used their understanding of crystalline energy manipulation to create barriers that disrupted Silari weapons, while their knowledge of their own world's geography provided crucial tactical advantages. Colonel, his communications specialist, called. "The Sovereign reports critical systems failure. They can't maintain altitude much longer." Hassan looked up to see the massive ship listing to port, its hull glowing red in places where atmospheric friction had overwhelmed failing shields. Yet even as it began its final descent, its weapons continued firing, clearing landing zones for evacuation craft and targeting the heaviest Silari concentrations. Inside the facility, a breakthrough occurred. The ancient systems suddenly pulsed with new energy as a Velaran scientist made physical contact with a human engineer, their combined bioelectric signatures creating a unique pattern. "The system is responding," the science leader exclaimed. "It recognizes the combined neural patterns. It wants both species to authenticate together." As the Sovereign made its last desperate contribution to the battle, the facility beneath the sacred mountain awakened fully for the first time in 50,000 years, recognizing at last the unity it had been programmed to await. The formal signing ceremony in the restored Great Hall of Velaris marked more than just a military alliance. It represented a fundamental shift in galactic politics. The chamber itself embodied this change. Crystalline architecture, repaired with earth metals, creating a hybrid beauty that neither civilization could have achieved alone. Admiral Blackwood, her uniform freshly pressed despite the bandages visible beneath her sleeve, stood beside Elder Ixal as representatives from both species gathered to witness history. Blackwood had survived the Sovereign's crash landing against overwhelming odds, rescued from the wreckage by a combined team of human marines and Velaran emergency workers. "Today we formalize what began in the heat of battle," Blackwood said, her voice carrying through the hall's perfect acoustics. "Not merely an agreement between governments, but a promise between peoples. Earth stands with Velaris, not as protectors, but as partners." Elder Ixal's crystalline form glowed with harmonics visible even to human eyes. What the ancients foresaw has come to pass. Two species, separated by vast distance yet united in spirit, have together unlocked a path forward that neither could walk alone. The treaty they signed established not just mutual defense, but scientific and cultural exchange. Already, human engineers were studying Velaran crystalline technology, while Velaran scientists eagerly examined Earth's unique approaches to spaceflight and medicine. At the hall's edge, Colonel Hassan stood with his senior officers, watching the ceremony with quiet satisfaction. "Not how I expected first contact to go," Lieutenant Chen remarked beside him. "Few things in life work out exactly as planned," Hassan replied. But sometimes they work out exactly as needed. High Arbiter Zelthar, representing the Galactic Concord, approached the central dais. The ancient being, a consciousness housed in an intricate crystalline matrix, moved with deliberate gravity that commanded immediate silence. For 10,000 years, Zalthar began, the Concord has observed without acting, studied without engaging, debated without deciding. We believed ourselves wise in our restraint. Today, we acknowledge our error. The Arbiter turned toward the human delegation. These humans, new to the stars by our reckoning, have demonstrated a truth we had forgotten. That wisdom without courage becomes mere caution, and civilization without compassion becomes merely advanced. The captured War Master Kravzak, now restrained by conquered peacekeepers, watched with naked hatred as his conquest crumbled, and his empire faced unprecedented sanctions from species that had previously turned blind eyes to Selari aggression. Beyond the ceremony, teams of human and Velaran researchers had begun the monumental task of studying the ancient repository. The facility beneath the sacred mountain had revealed only its first layer of secrets, including the method to neutralize the planet cracker that had threatened Velaris. Dr. Patel led the Earth contingent, working alongside Velaran scholars to decipher technologies left by beings who had apparently ascended beyond physical form millennia ago. The ancients didn't just leave knowledge, she explained to visiting dignitaries. They left tests, ethical challenges designed to ensure only worthy civilizations could access their greatest secrets. The first such test had been Velaris itself, a crisis that required selfless intervention from an unrelated species. That humans had passed this test, without even knowing of its existence, spoke volumes about what made humanity unique in the galaxy. As the ceremony concluded, Admiral Blackwood gazed through the hall's crystal windows at the stars becoming visible in the evening sky. Among them, Earth was too distant to see with the naked eye, yet suddenly connected to the galaxy in ways no one could have predicted. "We came as rescuers," she murmured to herself. "We remain as friends."